Okay, and under servers, then you go up and click add, and then we're going to go through the process of adding the vCenter server. This is going to be the IP address of the vCenter server that I have up and running. And I usually like to verify I've been setting up so much stuff of what IP is running on what. So .60 is the server I'm on, and .50 was the vCenter server I just set up. And here I'm going to type in the username and password of the God account I referred to, the administrator at vsphere.local. Which yet again, this is an account that you should never really have to change the username and the password to. And then I usually just take most of the defaults on this. Hit next. And then make sure when you get a pop-up you accept, view and accept the SSL. And on the next page you will be prompted to add your standalone composer server. Sorry about that. So I enter the standalone IP address for my composer server that I installed in my earlier video. And then I use the service account that I created in my earlier video for my domain. And this will also have a view certificate and accept. These are good signs that you're getting those posts. Now here I'm going to add my domain. So I'm going to add the name of my domain and yet again use my service account to register my domain. And this account is also going to be utilized for adding the linked clones when they're spun up to the OU, and also when they're removed and they disappear, they also the account's also used to remove the computer names from the domain organizational unit. And here's another good sign that your authentication is working correctly, is that that's not grayed out anymore and those checkboxes are available. Just hit next and then hit finish. This takes a moment or two for this to work correctly. And when you're done, this is what you want to see. My vCenter and my connection server listed. And up under the dashboard, you can go see all the new available items that are listed. And the color coding is just warnings it's given me about the self SSLs that's being used. I highly suggest if you have a production environment to replace these with SSLs and make sure that they don't expire, because that can cause all sorts of issues. Now the next steps would be actually going in and creating a desktop pool. And the desktop pools can be found under the catalog. Just click on desktop pools, click on add. But before we do that, I'm going to actually work on setting up my Windows 7 base machine, which will be utilized. And I have my Windows 7 machine on and running. And this will be the base image that will then have a snapshot on it. And then it will have the linked clones utilizing the snapshot from this image to operate off of. And my environment, I found it so that it's easier to get group policy assigned and have it part of the domain already. And when you do these operations, you want to make sure that they are shut off. And I've actually already created my snapshot, so the fact that it's installing an update, it honestly won't matter because my snapshot was already created. So anything that happens in the future, my images won't notice because I've actually got my snapshots created. And as you can see, I've got a snapshot called group policy added. And that will be the snapshot level group policy added that I will be using for my linked clones, which you'll see shortly here in videos when I set up the desktop pools. So make sure you shut off the machine and snapshot the machine when it's in an offline state. And that's how you make a snapshot if you really wanted to. Now make sure under resources, under catalog, you would select desktop pools. Click add. I'll leave it as automated, then floating. Hit the next button. I want linked clones. And you want to give it a unique ID and something descriptive. You also have display name. Personally, I'd suggest keeping these the same. But it's your setup, do as you wish. And then here I pretty much leave most of the defaults. These you could fine tune at a later date, but just for lab, there's nothing really drastic I need to change here to make it operate. Here I want a naming pattern. So if I have like Windows dash, it'd spin up machines called Windows -1, Windows -2, Windows -3. When it actually spins up, it gives the computer name to the machine and then actually does register it in Active Directory. So you want to make sure that you have a naming scheme that's not going to match any other computers that are on the domain, or you're going to end up with issues with your linked clones spinning up, because they won't be able to register in the domain because the computer name would already exist. Here I'm setting it up so I'd have a total of 6 desktops available max, and then I'll have 3 powered on and running, and then 3 that will be in a provision state, more or less. They're already created and ready to go. So as people start logging in, it will start creating more. And then I also said provision up front. And here I'm just using a lot of the defaults. Here you could separate some stuff out if you had multiple data stores available. And here's where you actually go and link into your vCenter stuff and click on your Windows 7 base machine, and then you're actually going to link right to that machine's snapshot, and that's the name of the snapshot I had. And a folder location, and this is just a lab, so I haven't created any folders or anything, so I'm just gonna put it in the default in the root. And then I'm going to select my host or cluster. Yet again, I haven't set up any cluster or anything like that. This is just a lab, so I didn't go to the excess troubles for vMotion and HA. Yet again, just select a host, hit OK, and select your data store. And I have 2. I've got one that's mainly running ESXi and just used for ISOs, and then one for storage and VMs. Just use the defaults. And as you see, there's not a lot of free space left, but it ends up utilizing the space very well. It's a warning because I don't have a cluster, so hit OK. Hit next. And you definitely want to read up on the multiple options you have available. It will affect how your environment operates and so forth. So you definitely want to review all the different options. I'm just working at getting this set up. And then also, like here, I'm going to browse. This is where it's integrated in my Active Directory. It shows me my directory tree of my organizational units. And I can just go through and select the OU that I created for my view desktops. Next, and hit finish. And when you're done, that's what you wanted to see was the desktop pool. And after a little while, you'll actually see in your VMware environment that it starts creating the new machines. And in the recent tasks, you'll also see all the work being done in the bottom of your vSphere software. So there's my desktop pool I created. And after a little while, first steps are provisioning. And you can see the name and then now all the computer naming scheme that I utilize and set up. And that was from a previous setup. So those computers I just removed because they didn't exist. It'll go through provisioning. There's probably like 3 different steps. What you're going to be looking for is you'll have 3 of them that'll, because I set it up total of 6, and then I had 3 and 3, so 3 of them become active and 3 of them will set it provisioned. And now what I'm doing is I want to set entitlement. Entitlement is like access or privilege rights. So what I'm looking for here is the security group that I created for being able to access these desktops in my Active Directory. So I created a security group called View Users and hit OK and hit OK, and that's right out of Active Directory. And now you'll see that there's an entitlement of 1. That means that there's 1 object that's been given permissions, but within that object, seeing it's a security group, you could add your entire company if you wanted to. And as you see down in recent tasks, it's doing its workload, it's cloning the virtual machine, which is actually cloning my base image. And after a couple more minutes, you'll actually see the machine starting to get spun up in your environment. And linking into your host, which is that IP on the host column. That's the ESXi host IP address. You can go to your connection server and go to the localhost URL to download the desktop client, where you can actually utilize it to remote into your spun up linked clones.